I close my eyes, and in the silence, I hear everything. The whir of my ancient bicycle's chain that morning, the hushed click of the mail slot, the muted shuffle of her slippers against the kitchen tile. Even now, I can make out the catch in her breathing when she saw me reading that unfamiliar envelope. No words spoken, just an odd tension crackling between us like a hidden radio frequency. It feels so long ago, yet that morning's hush reverberates in my head, refusing to fade. Back then, I had no idea those moments of stillness were about to detonate the comfortable illusion I called my life. The day started simply, predictably. I left the house at dawn, delivered the usual route of newspapers and a handful of special deliveries. The job was routine, one I'd done for years. Part-time newspaper courier, occasional freelance writer, a small but steady income that fit my quiet temperament. By 8, I was back at our suburban home, a modest 2-bedroom with a bit of peeling paint and a battered porch. The squeak of my bike chain preceded my arrival, a steady mechanical whine. For years, that sound signaled to my wife, Vanessa, that I was home, a cue to put on the kettle or start breakfast. But that day, the routine buckled. I parked my old bike on its usual hook in the garage. Entering the living room, I noticed the air felt charged. No cheerful greeting, just an oppressive hush, as though someone had pressed pause on the world. Then, I saw the letter on the table. It wasn't addressed to me. The name scrawled in bold black ink meant nothing to me. Julian Pierce. The return address was from downtown Chicago, some high-rise building number. My heart rattled, an inexplicable pang. I always handle mail, part of my job, part of my daily routine, never thinking much of it. But this time, that unfamiliar name seemed to glow with significance I didn't yet understand. Vanessa padded into the kitchen, wearing that silk pajama set I'd seen her wear now and then, an item that always made me feel a faint mixture of amusement and vague unease. On the back, embroidered in gold thread, were those words, Sex Machine V. The story behind them was never fully explained. She joked once it was a gag gift from a bachelorette party. But in that moment, under the fluorescent kitchen light, the letters looked mocking. I couldn't figure out why. Perhaps it was the tremor in her hands as she poured coffee, or the forced smile she aimed at me without meeting my eyes. When she noticed the envelope in my hand, her shoulders stiffened, just for a second. But I caught the involuntary twitch, the quick intake of breath. Then she lowered her gaze and murmured something about leftover errands, swirling sugar into her cup. My mind told me to ask a direct question. My mouth refused to cooperate. The silence between us stretched, taut as a wire. I placed the envelope on the countertop. I said nothing. She said nothing. That morning, I remember a strange swirl of images, the bright sunlight slanting through the window, the stale coffee aroma, the faint pulse in my ears that was too fast, too loud. My mind raced, conjuring scenarios. Who was Julian Pierce? A coworker? A potential client for her sales job? Or maybe an old friend from Milwaukee, where she grew up? Normally, I'd just ask. We'd always been open about such things, or so I believed. But something in Vanessa's posture, in the ridges of tension along her neck, told me she didn't want me to know. I retreated to the bedroom to shower off the morning sweat. As the water drummed on my shoulders, I tried to shake off the sense of dread creeping in. I'm overreacting, I told myself. It's just a letter. Yet the knot in my stomach wouldn't budge. Stepping out of the bathroom, I found her rummaging in the closet. She looked up, half-smiled, said she was late for work. There was no mention of the letter, no explanation. She left the house in a rush, the front door slamming with a finality that made me flinch. I dressed in jeans and an old t-shirt, poured myself another cup of coffee, and stood there alone. That's when I noticed the open mailbox on the table. Usually, I'd toss the envelopes onto my desk, sort them, do my routine. That morning, a single letter had me spiraling with suspicion. I read the name again, Julian Pierce. My chest felt tight, as though the entire weight of my marriage hinged on that piece of paper. I told myself I was acting crazy, prying into her business. Married couples share a life, but we also trust each other's privacy, right? Then the phone rang. A client of mine wanted to confirm an article draft. I forced my attention onto professional matters, burying the knot in my gut. For the rest of the day, I tried to go through my normal routine. Editing a short column, tidying the kitchen, fiddling with a broken hinge. But my mind kept circling back to the question, why did she look so frightened when she saw me holding that letter? That night, Vanessa came home later than usual. She wore an expression I couldn't quite decipher, like she had braced herself for something. I tried to be casual, greeting her with a subdued, long day. She simply nodded, set her purse down, and muttered something about needing a shower. When she emerged from the bathroom, she avoided my gaze. At dinner, we barely spoke. A thick hush pervaded the dining room. The only sounds were the scrape of forks on plates and the slight rasp of our breathing. I didn't ask. She didn't offer. Days passed, a quiet tension building in our house. I began to notice small, almost imperceptible changes in her demeanor. She checked her phone more often, smiling at some texts she never shared. She started going to client meetings that stretched into the late evening. Meanwhile, I busied myself with deliveries, with scribbling half-finished short stories, with reading noir novels that matched my darkening mood. Yet inside me, something was loosening, unraveling. One afternoon, I spotted a text message on her phone's lock screen. Just the preview of a name. Julian. My chest constricted. My mind roared. Still, I said nothing. I was too afraid of what would happen if I confronted her, too scared of the confirmation that might tear my world apart. And, humiliatingly, a part of me clung to hope that this was just a misunderstanding. That evening, I lingered in bed while she took a call in the living room. I could hear faint murmurs through the wall. Her voice was low, intimate. My throat went dry. My mind conjured the image of her smiling into the phone, leaning against the sofa, warmth in her eyes that I rarely saw these days. Everything inside me twisted into a cold knot. I wanted to barge out there, demand an explanation. But my feet felt glued to the floor, my heart pounding with the weight of dread. A miserable cowardice took root in me. Better not to know for sure, better to keep my illusions intact. It was around this time that I started dreaming of escape or death. Morbid fantasies flickered at the edges of my thoughts. I was never suicidal in my life, but I recognized a numb exhaustion settling in, that sense of emptiness where love used to reside. My wife was drifting away, and I was watching it happen like a helpless spectator. About a week later, the break came. I had finished my morning deliveries and was heading to a coffee shop near downtown to drop off a special package. As I arrived, I saw them through the window. Vanessa and a tall figure with broad shoulders, short dark hair, her hand on his knee, her face lit by a playful smile I hadn't seen in months. He leaned closer. The distance between them was more than friendly. My mind blanked. Then, in some corner of my chest, a searing anger ignited. I felt something tear inside me. I forced myself through the door, pretending not to see them, though my heart hammered so loudly I thought it would shatter my ribs. I picked up my coffee at the counter. I could feel the tension in my body, as if at any moment I might explode. She hadn't noticed me yet. I was behind a column near the entrance, half hidden. The swirl of coffee aroma mingled with the bitter taste of betrayal on my tongue. I glanced at them once more. He placed a hand on her thigh. She didn't move it away. Instead, she leaned in, whispered something in his ear, lips dangerously close to his neck. A flush of heat rose to my face. In that second, the reality of her betrayal took shape. No more illusions, no more half-guesses. She was with him, right there, in broad daylight. A surge of despair and rage nearly choked me. My fingers trembled around the paper coffee cup, so violently that a bit of hot liquid splashed onto my hand. I felt no pain, just a numb shaking. I rushed out. Perhaps she glimpsed me from the corner of her eye, or perhaps not. I didn't stick around to find out. I all but ran to my bike, fumbling with the lock, my breath coming in ragged bursts. The world spun as I pedaled away, my vision blurred by tears I refused to let fall. This is it, I thought. She's gone. That night, I couldn't eat. I waited up for her, the clock creeping past midnight. She breezed in around 12:30, hair slightly disheveled, the faint smell of cologne that wasn't mine clinging to her clothes. She gave me a startled look, as if I'd manifested out of nowhere. I stared at her for a long moment, hoping she'd confess, that she'd show the slightest sign of remorse. But she just mumbled something about a late client meeting. I wanted to say, "I saw you," but the words lay heavy on my tongue. My fear of finality, of confrontation, paralyzed me. Instead, I uttered, "Okay." She nodded, walked past me into the bedroom, and closed the door. I stood there in the dark living room, fists clenched, anger coiling inside like a snake waiting to strike. In the following days, I felt like a ghost in my own home. She was physically present, but emotionally absent. The phone beeped with her messages at odd hours. She started wearing more perfume, dressing up as if each day was a special occasion, eyes glowing with a spark I hadn't seen in so long. I realized she was in love, or at least in lust, with that other man, and that knowledge tore me apart. I tried finding solace in writing, but every sentence ended up soaked in bitterness. I wrote half a dozen furious paragraphs that I later deleted. I tried journaling the raw rage, the betrayal, the heartbreak. Everything revolved around her, around him, around the rotting shell of my marriage. A swirl of anger, pity, shock. Some nights, I lay awake imagining 100 different confrontations, screaming matches, vicious fights, or me pounding my fists against his face. Other times, I felt only hollow resignation. A part of me wanted to vanish, to throw myself off a bridge or collapse on the roadside during a delivery, and never get up. Then I remembered something Vanessa once said, "Not everything needs to be talked about." She told me that when we first got married, referencing some old argument. Now it rang with a new, darker meaning. If words were powerless, maybe I could fight back with silence. So I began my game. I withdrew, letting her slip deeper into her illusions. I stopped asking, "How was your day?" I barely acknowledged her late-night returns. When she tried to make casual conversation about groceries or bills, I responded with monosyllables. She sensed something had shifted, but I refused to voice it. I wanted her to feel uneasy, to question every glance, every quiet moment. Let her wonder how much I knew. In her confusion, she tried to be sweet sometimes, cooking dinner or offering me a shoulder rub. But her touch felt foreign now, as though she was only going through motions to keep the peace. My silence was both a shield and a sword. It cut me too. But I clung to it. I wanted her to squirm, to dread that I might snap at any moment. And each day, the tension built. I finally found proof, an explicit text conversation I stumbled upon when her phone lay on the kitchen table. She was showering. The screen lit up, showcasing words that stabbed me like knives. Explicit suggestions, plans for a weekend away. My stomach turned with nausea. I read enough to confirm how deep this had gone. Then I locked the phone, placed it exactly where I found it, and walked away. My face felt cold, my heart drumming in my ears. That night, she asked me if everything was all right. I looked at her. The question might have been genuine, or just a reflex. Her eyes flickered with something akin to guilt. My mouth opened, but again, the words jammed in my throat. I shook my head and walked out. I wasn't ready for the final confrontation, not yet. I needed time to plan, to gather everything that was fueling me. I spent the next few days playing detective. I followed her once, saw her slip into an upscale downtown building, presumably his place. I took photos with my phone from across the street, her figure stepping into the lobby, smiling at the security guard. Once I was certain, I turned my attention to my next move. How to end this. At my job, I grew distant from coworkers and clients. My few friends noticed my short replies. My mother called one evening. I lied that I was fine, just busy. A dark resolve replaced the sorrow in my veins. I fantasized about ways to destroy her illusions. Visions of me standing over them, brandishing the photos, throwing them on a table in a dramatic flourish, danced in my head. I wanted a reckoning. Then came the day that sealed my resolve. I returned home early, hoping to catch them if they decided to use my house for their secret rendezvous. Sure enough, in the driveway, I saw a sleek sports car, one I recognized from the coffee shop. My adrenaline spiked. My chest burned as though a hot iron pressed against it. For a moment, I hesitated, my hand trembling on the doorknob. Was I truly ready to witness the worst? I entered quietly, stepping into a hush so profound I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. The living room was empty. Then I caught muffled sounds from the bedroom. An unmistakable intimacy in the low moans, the rustle of sheets. My heart froze. I moved down the hall, each step an eternity. The door was slightly ajar. I saw them, half covered by the blankets, their bare limbs entwined. I felt my stomach churn, my body go rigid with anguish, so pure it left me lightheaded. The sight was raw, painfully real. I wanted to burst in, lash out. But something stopped me. Maybe the last shred of my dignity, or maybe a desire to truly corner them. I took a quick, silent step back. Bile rose in my throat. I turned and left the house, walking on autopilot until I collapsed on the curb outside. My lungs clawed for air. My eyes stung but wouldn't cry. I sat there for what felt like hours. When I finally rose, my knees wobbled. My fury had crystallized into cold determination. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The heartbreak was replaced by a dark clarity. She was in my home, in our bed with him. There was no going back. They left about an hour later, his arm around her waist. I watched from the side of the house, hidden by the shadows. She was laughing softly. He leaned to kiss her cheek before they got into his car and disappeared. I felt like a ghost, invisible yet fully aware. That night, I didn't confront her. I let her come home around dinner, move about with a casual air, but inside, I was forging my plan. The next day, I took the photos I'd snapped, the texts I'd printed, the memories I'd scribbled down. I placed them all in a small folder. Then I waited in the living room for her to return from work. She walked in, dropped her purse, and paused at the sight of me sitting there with the folder on the coffee table. My heart hammered, but my face remained still. I gestured for her to come closer. Silence. She hesitated, eyes darting to the papers. Finally, I tossed the evidence onto the table. Photo after photo. Screenshots of her texts. A pause. The color drained from her face. She reached for a photo. Her image, stepping into Julian's building. Another, them sitting at that coffee shop, hands interlocked. Her voice dried up. She tried forming words, but nothing emerged. I let her see it all. Then I said, quietly, "Tell me everything." Her voice was a whisper. I didn't. "It's not." She stopped. In the quiet you could hear her shaky breath, the hum of the air conditioner, the pounding of my heart. Eventually, she sank into a chair, covering her mouth with her hand. A tear slid down her cheek. I felt neither pity nor anger at that moment, just a heavy finality. When she found her voice, she stammered about losing affection, about her confusion, about how things just happened. She mumbled that Julian was someone who listened to me, who made her feel alive. My stomach knotted at that word. Alive, like my presence was a slow death to her. I stared at her, face impassive, letting the silence fill the space between us. She waited for me to respond, but I remained mute. Finally, she rose, tried to touch my arm. I recoiled. My eyes locked on hers, and I saw guilt and fear swirl inside her. That was the moment the entire dam of my rage cracked. The images of their tangled bodies in our bed hammered at my skull. I closed my eyes, inhaled, exhaled. I said, "Leave," just a single command. She stood there, blinking, uncertain whether I meant the living room or the house altogether. I gave a small nod toward the door, and her face crumpled. She began to plead, something about how we could fix this, that we should talk. My jaw tightened. The dread and heartbreak gave way to a savage satisfaction. She was powerless now. I repeated, "Leave." I pointed to the door. She stared, tears streaming. Then she fled. She stayed at a friend's place that night, or maybe a hotel. I didn't care enough to ask. I sat in the silence of our home, my home, feeling an excruciating combination of triumph and devastation. In that hush, I remembered the day I delivered that letter. That was the moment the first crack appeared. Now the entire edifice of our marriage lay in ruins. Days passed, and the numbness shifted into a deeper resolution. She texted me, tried calling, left voicemails, apologies, confessions, pleas for a second chance. I listened to them once, then deleted them. My mind was made up. I wanted her to know I could strike at any moment, but also that maybe I wouldn't. Let her live in that uncertainty. Her lover, Julian, tried to contact me too, presumably to talk this out like men. I ignored him. He had stolen what I cherished, turned my home into a stage for his lust. The thought of him made my blood boil, yet I refused to lash out physically. Something else brewed inside me, a desire for a more subtle final revenge. I started exploring legal avenues, divorce procedures, property rights, everything. I kept it quiet. My intention was to let her think we might reconcile, that I was just hurt and needed time, all while methodically severing the ties. Meanwhile, I let rumors trickle out. I confided in exactly one mutual friend who was known for having a big mouth. Word spread that I had discovered everything, that I was biding my time. Within days, Vanessa's phone calls multiplied. She knocked on the door once, early in the morning, but I refused to open. I was determined she should never feel stable again, at least not with me. And yet, in the corners of my mind, sorrow lingered like a bruise. Late at night, I'd remember our early years, the day we met in Chicago, the times we laughed over silly inside jokes. I'd see her green eyes, bright with happiness. I'd remember the wedding, my chest swelling with pride as I slipped the ring onto her finger. Now, all of that seemed like a distant life. Still, love doesn't evaporate instantly. It mutates, grows malignant. My love had curdled into loathing. A month went by. Papers were filed. I scheduled a meeting with an attorney, letting them handle the details of dividing assets. Vanessa found out soon enough. One afternoon, she ambushed me outside the grocery store. She grabbed my arm, tears streaking her cheeks, voice trembling as she said she was sorry, that it was a mistake. I studied her face, saw the ravages of guilt and fear. A part of me almost pitied her. Then the memory of her in my bed with him flared. I shrugged off her touch and walked away. Eventually, we had to speak about logistics. She wanted to keep certain furniture, personal items, half the equity in the house. We negotiated in clipped tones over the phone. No face-to-face meetings, no warm memories. My attorney insisted on fairness, so I complied. My silence, however, never wavered. Even on calls, I said only what was necessary. I kept my voice calm, monotone. She tried to ask how I was, if maybe there was a chance. I gave no answer. She'd often hang up sobbing. One night, however, something inside me cracked again. I was alone in the living room, listening to old jazz records. A wave of grief flooded me. In that moment, the numbness lifted, replaced by raw agony. My hands shook. The tears I'd suppressed for so long finally came. I cried, an ugly, heaving cry that left me gasping. I realized I was mourning not just her betrayal, but also the man I used to be, the hopeful husband, the dreamer who believed in forever. Now I was a husk of that man, hardened and bitter. But something else emerged from that breakdown. A flicker of strength. A voice inside me whispered, "You will survive this." I recognized that I was already in the process of remaking myself. The betrayal had shattered me, but the pieces could be reassembled into someone new. That was the promise hidden in my tears. The next day, I resolved to finalize matters. Enough half measures, enough psychological warfare. My vengeance was to rebuild my life on the ashes of our marriage, leaving her and her lover with the guilt and regrets of what they had done. I set a meeting date with the attorney, confirmed the final arrangements. There would be no dramatic confrontation, no physical altercation. Instead, I'd hand her the signed documents, watch her face as she realized I was truly done. On that final day, we met in the attorney's office. She arrived first, eyes rimmed with redness, her hair pinned in a careful updo that failed to hide her anxiety. I walked in, folder in hand, trying to still the pounding in my chest. She looked up, and for a moment, tears seemed about to fall. Our attorney cleared his throat, directed us to sign in a few places. The atmosphere felt heavier than lead. My pen hovered over the line. Then I scribbled my name. With that signature, I severed the last official tie. The hush in the room was deafening. She tried to speak. But no words came. I placed the pen down, stood, and nodded to the attorney. Then I turned to Vanessa. Our eyes locked for a breath. In her stare, I saw regret, sorrow, a silent plea for forgiveness. Perhaps she wanted me to say something final, to wrap this up with a neat bow. But I had no such mercy left. I left her there, file in hand, tears glistening on her lashes. Outside, the sun was blinding. I shielded my eyes, inhaled the crisp autumn air. My heart felt hollow yet oddly unburdened. In that moment, I realized I had walked through hell, and though scorched, I had emerged still breathing. The betrayal that once threatened to kill me had instead forced me to become something else, someone stronger, more certain of himself. Weeks rolled on. I found a new routine, a new apartment not far from the city. I still delivered newspapers in the early morning, still wrote freelance pieces, but my nights were my own. Sometimes I pedaled down to the lakefront, watched the water shift under the moonlight. The memory of her lingered, yes, but each day it stung a little less. Sometimes I even allowed myself a fleeting moment of nostalgia for the woman I once loved, not the one who had laid with another man under our own roof. That's how my revenge manifested. Not in violence, not in heated curses or dramatic showdowns, but in a final, calm severance. I robbed her of absolution, withheld my words, forced her to carry the weight of what she'd done. She lost the privilege of my presence, my devotion, my kindness. And in choosing that path, I discovered a deeper well of resilience within me, something fierce and uncompromising. The man who once dreamed of dying to escape the pain now found a strange new vitality, a renewed sense of self. Sometimes, late at night, the memory of that coffee shop meeting flashes in my mind. Her hand on his knee, that secret smile, or the image of them in my bed, her hair fanned across the pillow we once shared. Rage flares up again, but it's quickly tempered by the knowledge that I survived it. I stand, battered but unbroken, forging ahead with the scraps of my dignity and the promise of a future she can't reach. On the rare occasion a mutual acquaintance asks me what happened, I simply say, "We ended." They sense the undercurrent of finality in my voice and seldom pry. I've left the details behind me. She might find solace in that man's arms, or maybe they'll drift apart. I don't need to know. My silence endures, unyielding. It's my testament to the wreckage she caused and the life I rebuilt. And in that hush, a hush where every memory can still be heard, I stand quietly triumphant. I was destroyed, but I grew stronger. I was betrayed, but I endured. Each dawn, as I ride my old bicycle into the sunrise, I taste the air of a new day. There's a faint bitterness, yes, but also the thrill of possibility stirring in my lungs, and that, I realize, is enough to keep going, enough to face tomorrow without fear, enough to find some glimmer of peace in the aftermath of her betrayal. I breathe in and out. Silence, once deafening, now feels like an ally. And I keep pedaling forward.